Hi, this is Margaret Meloni, and welcome to the Death Dhamma Podcast. Open and honest discussions with wise and skillful teachers about their experiences with life, death, and Buddhism. If you wonder how others on the path have dealt with death and dying and grief, then be sure to listen in. Everybody has a story, a perspective, and a valuable lesson to share. Embrace death, live a full life, and learn how to love impermanence. Because as my dear father used to say, nobody gets out of this alive. Hello and welcome to today's episode. And before we jump in, I want to encourage you, visit me at margaretmeloni.com and sign up because you will get all the updates on when my next book, Sitting with Death, will be released, which is in September, and which is based on all of these great discussions we're having here on the podcast. Plus, of course, there's more. And you will receive a free audio of part of the introduction to my first book, Carpooling with Death. And if you're on the list, you will receive a audio chapter for free of Sitting with Death when it is released. So, oh my goodness, so many good reasons to come join me. And of course, please continue to subscribe to the podcast. And thank you so much for being here. Welcome. It is time for Death Dhamma Ahas. And today, I will be sharing with you lessons learned from my discussion with Cayce Howe. And before I do that, just a quick reminder that Sitting with Death, Buddhist Insights to help you face your fears and live a peaceful life, is coming in September. So keep listening, and thank you for being a subscriber. And when you visit me at margaretmeloni.com, you will get updates as to when new podcast episodes are released and information as it gets closer to when the book will be available. And right away, you'll receive a free audio chapter from my first book, Carpooling with Death. And as it gets closer and when it is ready, you'll get a free audio chapter of Sitting with Death. Now, let's turn our attention to insights from my discussion with Cayce. I believe I've shared with you that at the time that my husband, Ed, was diagnosed with cancer, and we learned that it was terminal, and that ultimately he died, we had been visiting the Sangha where Cayce Howe was teaching. And at first, it started with Ed going to, I think it was like a Thursday evening group and sitting and meditating and sharing with people there. And it's not that I didn't want to go with him. As I recall, at the time I was working on my PhD. And so I had classes I was still taking and a lot of work that I was doing. But I also want to say that we both recognized that even going through this situation, the stages of cancer and really learning about what it really meant and the true severity of the real cancer and grappling with Ed's impending death, that there was still necessity for him to have some time on his own to process it. And we decided together that we would keep me doing some of the things that I normally did, working and going to school. Not that Ed and his health weren't a priority, of course, absolutely. But that what we decided is we were going to keep living even while he was dying. And to keep living even while he was dying meant that he would still have a life and that we would continue my parts of my life. Because when he was gone, that's what I was going to need to do. And so we didn't stop everything. Now, every family, every couple needs to make their own decision. I just share with you that that is a thing that worked for us. So Ed had his meditation group. I had my work in my school, and we still had plenty of loving and supporting time together. And we had some fun times, and we had some difficult times, and just like any other couple or family would have. And as we progressed through those times, when the Thursday night group ended, it was around the time that Ed learned that he was terminal and that we went into home hospice. And Cayce started coming to the home and meditating with us at home. And then there came a time where it was more meditating with me as you know, it became harder for Ed to concentrate. And sometimes he could meditate and sometimes he could not. And it was during that time that Cayce taught us both the saying that always, every day, the living are dying and the dying are living. And that was such a useful, helpful expression. We knew one day there would be the day that Ed would die, but we also knew that there would be days when it wasn't the day that he died. And that expression, there's so much there. I remember that after the fact, having a discussion with an acquaintance of mine, and how when her own mother learned that she was ill and she was terminal, and they started making plans for going through her terminal illness and what support looked like during that time, and then her mother died peacefully in her sleep one night, none of that was necessary. And so she was dying, but not the way they thought and not when they thought. And I know I've shared with all of you that right before Ed died, my mother died of a heart attack 5 days before. And it should not have been surprising. She was a woman in her 80s, but still it was an example of, oh, the living are dying and the dying are living. And what this all really comes to is every day there is death and every day there is life. And on the days where there is life, live. Know also that there is death, and live with both of these potentialities as you go through your day. Not to step through your day in fear, but just to step in your day with awareness of, am I doing today what I want to be doing today? Am I using my time in the way in which I want to be using my time? We are all officially dying, whether we like it or not. And Cayce talked about, before he got into his current Tibetan tradition and practice, that he had come from a more bliss-based Hindu tradition. And then when he went and spent the year living at the Tibetan Buddhist Center and began to be taught to focus on impermanence, he really had some aversion. You know, he really thought, why are we meditating on this? I remember when I was new, having some aversion to the Four Noble Truths. The truth, first of all, that there is suffering, because I thought I was a happy human being and I wasn't suffering. And it took a few times for me to understand that, first of all, no one was accusing me of anything bad, so there's nothing for me to feel guilty about. And that, yes, in life there is suffering, and the suffering comes, one of the things that the suffering comes from is from that clinging and from the aversion. And our best way through all of this is not to sidestep, but to just deal with what is real. And Cayce talks about that, how when he joined his Tibetan practice and he spent so much time at that meditation center, he realized that he was being taught to look at things exactly as they are, and that the more we can do that, the more natural it will become. And then we can move away from resistance. What we're doing is we're chipping away our resistance, we're chipping away our aversion, we're chipping away that part of us that wants to be bliss-based, that only wants to think about the good and the positive. We don't want to think about the living are dying and the dying are living, but ultimately we're all dying. We just want to think about the fun parts of living. But our practices are teaching us to watch change. And we start in the smallest of ways. In your first meditation, the first time you sit and it's so difficult and you wonder, is my mind ever going to stop leaping around from yesterday to tomorrow to today to when I was 5 to will I live to be 75? All that leaping around. But as we leap and something comes up and something else goes away, so as something arises and something else is ceasing, we're experiencing deaths, small deaths, right? The death of a moment, the death of a thought, of a label, of a concept. And as we move on in our practice, we realize change is what is happening all of the time. The basic essence of reality is change. And we're not always having big epiphanies. And if you do, that's amazing and beautiful. But so often our growth comes from this chipping away, the consistency of our practice, the understanding that you may be seeking something, but while you're seeking, you're getting closer to your own death. It's okay. Keep seeking. Seek to become familiar with the nature of an emotion, the nature of our thoughts, and of how they can be in process. And remember that some of our suffering comes from not being able to deal with the emotions, not being able to accept impermanence and change. We latch on to something, a person, a place, an idea, a concept. We latch on to the emotions we feel as we go through difficult times. But to latch on and grab onto, I'm sad, my life is horrible, everything is terrible right now, is a form of clinging. And if we grab on hard enough, we're not going to notice that we are no longer sad. We are just hanging on to being sad. We've let ourselves be the emotion, and you're not. You're not the emotion. And I bet this sounds familiar. And it should, because we're far enough along now together in our journey in the Death Dhamma Podcast to recognize some common themes. Remember, there's a difference between something arising in you and something being you. Even on my most difficult days, when I was racked with sadness, I wasn't that sadness. It was that what had arisen in me that day. And you know what? Not even for the full day. For part of that day. Everything is rising and ceasing. And it's all valid. Whatever you're feeling, that is what you are feeling. Watch it, but it doesn't own you. It doesn't have to be you. And you don't have to do anything about it. Because remember, we are human beings. We are not human doings. So keep going forward and be consistent and let the chipping away happen naturally and progress naturally through your practice. Every time you sit and then every time you stand up again, you are changed. And that's how it's meant to be. This has been the Death Dhamma Podcast with Margaret Meloni. Thank you for being here. Your reviews and comments are greatly appreciated. And please come find me on margaretmeloni.com. MargaretMeloni. And don't forget to check out Carpooling with Death, How Living with Death Will Make You Stronger, Wiser, and Fearless. Available in all your favorite formats over on Amazon. And most importantly, may you be well. May you be happy. May you be safe, at ease, and free from suffering. Bye for now.